evening. My name is Catherine All, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Kitsap, I want to welcome you all to the 23rd Legislative District Senator Virtual Forum. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that doesn't support or oppose political parties or candidates. After careful study and consensus by our members, the League does take positions on issues, and we take action on those positions at the local, state, and national level. We would like to acknowledge that our homes and gathering places in the 23rd Legislative District are within the ancestral territories of the Suquamish and S'Klallam peoples, and those two tribes are an important part of the district. The rules for tonight's webinar will have each candidate will have a minute and a half for an opening statement. Then we will have questions. Candidates will have 1 minute each to answer questions submitted by the public. Following that, each candidate will have 1.5 minutes for a closing statement. Each one of you deserves our thanks for stepping up and running for office. Please be respectful of each other. You deserve that. The candidates, in the order that they will be on the ballot, are Lance Bird, Drew Hansen, and Ace Haynes. We sent an invitation and the Zoom link to all candidates, and Lance Bird declined to participate. So we will go ahead with the two of you candidates. And starting with the opening statement, Drew, you get to go first.
Great. Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you to the League, as usual, for sponsoring this forum. It is tremendous that the members are willing to give its time to educate the public about this race. I know everyone's mind is probably on races that have more press salience than the 23rd Legislative District Senate, but this is an important office. The job of the senator is to serve in the smaller of the two bodies and represent the interests of our district. What I've done over the past term as a senator and over the past decade in the House has all been focused around helping people find decent jobs to support their families. So I'm responsible for new electrical engineering programs at Olympic College in partnership with WSU, new cybersecurity and early childhood education programs, also at Olympic College in partnership with Western. And about 5 years of work is about to start coming to fruition with a significant expansion of Western's presence on the peninsulas. The president last year publicly committed that they would bring 1,000 new degree opportunities to the Kitsap and Olympic peninsulas. That's going to be transformative for people's ability to stay right here and get trained to make some money, whether as a nurse, as a welder, as a cybersecurity technician, any of the above, and support their families without having to take a ferry or go over a bridge. That's always been what I've worked on and what's on my heart. And if you trust me with the opportunity to continue to serve, that's what I will continue to work on.
Okay, thank you. Ace, your opening statement.
Hello, my name is Ace Haynes. I've lived here my entire life. My parents ran for the 23rd House seats in 2000. Since then, we haven't been making a lot of progress. Drew has been in government for the last 10 years and our ferries have gone downhill. You know, I really wish that I was running for a House seat and Bryn Felix was running for the Senate, but unfortunately, that's just not the way things have turned out. So here I am to give people a choice and an opportunity to get the representation in the 23rd Legislative District that we deserve. We've been gerrymandered into a solid blue district, which means our own representatives go to Olympia and support swing district candidates. You know, Drew goes and votes for the police reform bills put forward by Republicans that don't progress our state at all. And then I'm trying to represent our whole district. So there's a lot of issues that I would like to address that I don't think we're going to get into tonight. The League of Women Voters representative at Juneteenth said we would get the questions in advance. That didn't happen. But I would like to talk about things like abortion, gun control issues, right to repair, police asset forfeiture. And instead, I believe we're going to be talking about things like healthcare and hopefully schools. And I will concede my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ace. We never send out the questions in advance, so I'm sorry you were told that. But they were submitted by the public. We may not get to all of them, but let's start with the first one. And Ace, you get to go first on this. What are your funding priorities for the upcoming session? And would you consider cutting some of the corporate tax breaks?
So I do like this question. I heard it when we did the House forums. And I thought it was a little weird because the governor sets the preliminary budget and has a lot of veto power. And recently, our outgoing governor has shown an exceptional willingness to use that. So we don't really have a lot of budgetary control. We can try. Obviously, tax breaks for corporations are probably misplaced. I think we do have room for property tax breaks, particularly for the smallest landowners. But as far as efficiency of the budget goes, because I think that's something we can actually deal with, there's lots of areas of the budget that are being just overlooked and rubber stamped year after year. And more than anything, I would like to see our tax dollars spent efficiently. I know the North Kitsap School District is running a $5 million annual budget deficit that leaves them bankrupt, but we can't get funding from the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Drew, your turn.
I am always open to taking another look at the entire tax structure and any particular corporate tax incentives. In fact, I have been a fairly reliable vote, perhaps one of the few Democrats to vote against the extending of tax incentives for data center construction, because I did not think it was a worthwhile use of public money to give a large tax incentive for projects that don't create all that many ongoing jobs. So I'm happy to look again at anything that, over my position has passed into law. I think you asked, the first half of the question was about key funding priorities. Education has always been my key funding priority, particularly around higher education. And in fact, I'm responsible for the 2019 bill that imposed a small surcharge on the earnings of large corporations, Microsoft, Amazon, and so on, and use that money to make college affordable for tens of thousands of Washington state families. So I would plan to do more of that in the future on the direct sort of spending tax side, as well as on the tax break side.
Okay, thank you. Second question. Drew, you get to go first on this one. How will you stay connected with your constituents, not just the ones with the loudest voices?
We love being in touch with our constituents. In fact, some of the most fun of every session is when people are able to come visit us in Olympia. So and these are tremendously influential around policy. I mean, we had a group from one of the Suquamish tribe affiliated substance abuse treatment centers come down. We had a very good discussion about addiction and prevention and what cannabis is doing and what they are seeing with cannabis trends, which led me to become a bit more active in high THC, high potency cannabis. And that happens, that happens, again and again and again and again. We have people from the district with particular expertise from our lived experience in particular issues that write in or visit, and we use that to form our legislative opinions. So that's what I've always done. I love doing it. It's always great to see people. And of course, it's always great to get people's emails. We try to get back to people. It takes time, but we do try to get back to people and stay in touch that way. And then, of course, being out in the community with things like this.
Okay, thank you. Ace?
May I hear the question?
Yeah. How will you stay connected with all of your constituents, not just the ones with the loudest voices?
Yeah, I've always accentuated my community service work, and oftentimes when I'm out doing things with very few participants in the middle of nowhere, I am told, you know, why are you doing this? You're not going to meet a bunch of people doing trail cleanups in the North Kitsap Heritage Park. But honestly, the people that you meet aren't going to make it down to Olympia either. So that's how I stay in touch with my community, is boots on the ground everywhere where anyone can be found. You know, if you want to know what's going on in Buck Lake, you got to head up to Hansville and ask some people that are sitting around Buck Lake. I've always been going the longest distance to meet the fewest people, which I think helps me find the people that aren't able to speak the loudest. And I'm going to continue to do that. You know, I don't go door to door in neighborhoods that are really prominent. I have a phone number and you can call me. I would recommend it, 360-626-1945. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question. And Ace, you get to go first on this one. What should the Department of Transportation do in the near term, like next 2 years, and in the longer term, over 10 years, to improve the availability of functional ferries to keep the system able to meet its schedule? And what role will you play in addressing these issues?
Honestly, in the near term, it's a disaster. I would like to advocate for a bunch of things that aren't on the table. Smaller ferries are easier to deploy when we have staff shortfalls. Our district will probably need ferries on the Hood Canal before too long. The Hood Canal Bridge is going to spend a lot of time being open for marine traffic and closed to cars. And the solution so far has been to build really large parking lots that might not even empty between bridge openings. So our district is severely under-recognized, even though we have 3 ferry terminals, because we send a bunch of Democrats to Olympia who cater to swing districts, islands, and ski resorts and metropolitan areas. So honestly, just getting me elected and putting 1 Republican in the 23rd Legislative District will get our other representatives listened to. We probably can't fix the problem in 2 years. It's been a long time brewing. Thank you.
Okay. Drew?
So the ferry situation is a disaster and an embarrassment for the state. We have tried and not succeeded for some time to persuade our legislative colleagues to make the ferries a priority. Shortly after I got in the legislature, I voted against a large gas tax increase because not enough of the money was going to go to the ferries. It was something like 800 million for a single highway in Spokane and 600 million for the entire state ferry system. And I voted against that one. That's the dynamic that we face, is for better or for worse, ferry communities are not a majority in the legislature, although there are a lot of us by ferry impacted districts. That we are now on the path to fixing this. Our legislative colleagues have finally realized the severity of the crisis. So with procurement reform, so we can get new boats up faster and cheaper, with gap filling, with Kitsap Transit passenger only ferries, and with aggressive measures to recruit more crew so that we have fewer crew related cancellations. That's the right path. It's going to take some time to make a difference, but this is the right path.
Okay, thank you. And Drew, start with this one. What solution do you see for the traffic problems in Kingston when high ferry ridership occurs?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's been a continual source of frustration. So there is a working group around that Commissioner Rolfes and others are on that will probably come up with some suggestions. We have typically prioritized like ferry related transportation requests in the transportation budget, and we often have some success in getting those. I mean, not the big ones, like should you build more boats, because that's too big to be a member request, but things like making it easier for people in Kingston to get to and from the ferry and make it easier for businesses and neighbors to get around it. So really, I'll look forward to kind of whatever the recommendation of that working group is, and I'm almost certain we'll put that forward as a priority.
Okay, thank you. Ace?
I love this one because, again, the answer really is pretty simple. It's smaller boats. Having 180 cars or 130 cars try and get off at the same time makes a traffic mess. And unless you have timed lights that just stay green until every car is out of town, there's going to be a problem. But our district that needs the smaller boats has been ignored for 20 years now. The other issue that we have with these ferry boats is that they're going to think about moving to electric boats, which I love electrification. Electric cars with regenerative braking makes all the sense in the world, but boats don't generally have regenerative braking. They often use energy to slow down. Electric boats will take way too long to recharge. They'll have horrible turnaround times. It's logistically the worst use of emerging technology. And this is why we need more STEM in the classroom. Our kids would tell you that this was bad if they had the competitions that would show you this. Thank you.
Okay. Next question. The legislature has added funding over the last several years to address homelessness and affordable housing, but it doesn't seem to be getting better. What more can be done? Ace?
Our legislature has two definitions for affordable housing that most lay people would not recognize. The first one is affordable housing. It just means housing that is regulated by the government. So if they have government regulations on it, they call it affordable housing. The second one is housing that is affordable, which just means that the people that live in it pay less than 30% of their income for their housing. The solution to make housing that is affordable has often just been displace poor people and put rich people in houses. That's not a really good plan. It's led to the problem we have now. And then the idea that affordable housing is just regulated housing that has been the premise of all of their working solutions for 10 years or more is why we have this problem. We literally just need to change the definition. Right now, they're pushing quadruplexes that people do not want as the new affordable housing. Why? Why can't we just build the houses on the lots that exist? Thank you.
Thank you. Drew?
The reason we haven't seen more progress than we have is that the need is extraordinary and continues to grow. We are trying to create more housing. And let me just pause there with kind of what we're doing and the direction it is. It's really an all of the above approach. First of all, we got to build a bunch more market rate housing, a lot more market rate housing in areas that are already zoned for density. So we're not like clear cutting a bunch of forests to do it. Second, we need income limited affordable housing. I've supported a lot of investments through the Housing Trust Fund to create more income limited affordable housing. And we're seeing some of those opening. We saw a new project in Bremerton that we did a ribbon cutting on last year. It's fantastic. And then third, of course, are shelters, permanent supportive housing, stuff for its people who are really in pretty significant crisis. And again, we've seen some of those come open, like the new Pendleton Place development, where the league, God bless you all, made welcome baskets for all the new residents who are going to be in those supportive housing units. That's exactly what we need, right? It's this all of the above approach that we just need to keep the pedal to the ground on.
Thank you. Next question. What is your view on ranked choice voting? Drew?
Everyone seems to love ranked choice voting. People get so excited about ranked choice voting. I think it's sort of fictional to assume that people have detailed, specific criteria or rankings in their minds between the third or fourth candidate in a down ballot election or the second or third. It's enough to get people to vote for one. So I have been supportive. If people want to, jurisdictions want to experiment with ranked choice voting, this all seems fine. I am totally skeptical that it is the giant cure-all for democracy that many of the strong proponents seem to think it is.
Okay, thank you. Ace?
Yes, I love ranked choice voting. We used it a lot in the youth programs when I was working in Bainbridge Island and at the Kitsap County Housing Authority. Honestly, it can be done wrong, so it's not just one system. A lot of people think that the only way to do ranked choice voting is single vote, top-down voting. Mathematically, this is probably the worst way to implement ranked choice voting. I think we desperately need it, particularly in the primary, just to whittle the candidates down and to make it so that you could select a broad ballot of lesser known candidates and still end up with one of them making it into the general election. And I know from the earlier forums, you had a question, Catherine, about whether it would be economically viable in Kitsap County. We use the Hart InterCivic system. It's all ready to go for ranked choice voting. It wouldn't even cost us anything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. We have a medical crisis with our only hospital and most providers in Kitsap County. What, if anything, can the legislature do to address this and make sure all our medical groups follow state law regarding reproductive health and end-of-life care? Ace?
Yeah, so I was part of the group of people who protested.
Wait a
Oh,
minute,
I'm sorry, is
Ace
that
goes
Ace?
first
My
on this.
fault. I apologize.
We're going back and forth.
My bad.
Okay, Ace.
Yes, honestly, this was a problem when they started building the hospital in Silverdale. I blame the city of Paulsbo. We should have had a hospital in Paulsbo and a hospital in Bremerton. It would have been better for the entire county for a long time. Paulsbo wouldn't get the building codes through, and they ended up putting the whole project in Silverdale, and it's terrible. Then we have the CHI issue with them denying people access to medical care based on the hospital's preference and their religious preference over the preferences of the patients that have been brought there by calling public ambulances and requesting public services. So I personally am just offended by that, but the solution that I've come across that seems to work for most people is to simply force them to be hospitals first and religious centers second. I don't have any problem with religions wanting to work hospitals. They just have to make it so that the hospitals work for the public and allow us all of that services that would be available in a public setting. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Drew?
Thank you. So I was part of the group of people who protested the Harrison decision to close the Bremerton facility because my own view was we are far too big and far too spread out to just have one fully functioning hospital. And I regret to acknowledge that I and others were totally right about that, right? I mean, the overcapacity that we've seen is an index that we are underserved. The practical problem is it's not easy to run a profitable hospital in this area, which is one reason you do not see a lot of people clamoring to come in. There's the possibility of a public hospital district if people in the district decide to go that route. Then more near term, sort of tend to prevent the access problems. There's a legislative initiative called the Keep Our Care Act, which I supported in the Senate, which would create essentially antitrust type review for mergers of healthcare facilities to make sure that they don't decrease the services available, particularly with reference to end-of-life care and other things that might be affected. So I supported that, didn't make it across the finish line.
Okay, thank you, Drew. Next question, and Drew, you get to go first on this one. Do you think extreme weather events are increasing? And if so, how are they affecting Washington people?
It sure seems like they are. I don't remember wildfire smoke when I was growing up in Washington State. I mean, I don't remember wildfire smoke 10 years ago. So that's the way that we are feeling it most strongly. And I think that's almost certainly a climate change driven phenomenon. Like, and it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. So our strategy in the state on this, as you may be aware, we passed a law called the Climate Commitment Act that attempts to put a price on carbon and over time ratchet down the emissions that Washington State is producing. So we can at least do our part to slow climate emissions. And then also, just as importantly, provide proof of concept that there's a way to do this for other states and other nations to follow suit. Then on kind of the prevention and mitigation end, we have made significant investments in wildfire prevention and wildfire suppression. That's the kind of thing that we are going to do much more of, unfortunately, as we see more of these extreme events.
Okay, thank you. Ace?
May I please hear the question again?
Yeah, do you think extreme weather events are increasing? And if so, how are they affecting Washington folks?
So we're really fortunate around here. It's a nice area. Our extreme weather events is when it reaches 95 degrees. And I get a little tired of people from California and Texas coming up here and explaining how oh, it's not 110 and it's not really muggy. No, those are extreme. It's not the way it was when I was growing up. Certainly in the winter time, snow is practically a thing of the past. Like we get 4 or 5 inches here and there, but I remember feet of snow and weeks of dealing with it. So I definitely feel like we've seen some climate change year after year. I don't need someone to tell me it was really hot in 1933 to know that it's gradually been getting warmer. And frankly, an episode of King of the Hill, first episode, in fact, Dale Gribble goes into explaining how, trying to combat global climate change is just feeding into UN commissars telling us how hot it's going to be in our outdoors. And Hank tells him, Dale, it's already 110 degrees in the summer. And if it gets 1 degree hotter, I'm going to kick your ass. Yeah, I'm tired of climate change. We need to do something about it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, then, as a follow-on question, Ace, what is your position on Initiative 2117, which would repeal the Climate Commitment Act?
My opinion on that initiative and all initiatives is pretty much the same. They're literally the public given a choice between doing nothing and doing what's often a dramatic overstep. And what should, if it passes, be a call to the legislator to do something. We passed a gun reform bill like 5 years ago, and everyone agreed that the education portion of it was terrible. But our legislature was like, oh, initiative was passed, it's good to go. It's not. We really do need for initiatives to be a first step, not a last step. So if we do pass it, great, let's look at the bill. If we don't pass it, honestly, I still want to look at it. I think too often we pass some really solid feel-good type measures and give them fancy names, and then it doesn't actually translate to immediate progress or any progress at all. So I think we need to take a real hard look at what is going to prevent future climate catastrophes. Thank you.
Okay. Drew?
This will be a short one, given my last answer. I voted for the Climate Commitment Act in the legislature, and I still support it.
Okay. What are your positions on the other initiatives? Drew, first, 2109, which would repeal the capital gains tax.
I voted for the capital gains tax in the legislature. I strongly support the capital gains tax. I think it is totally fair that if you are making $250,000 or more in taxable capital gains in a year outside of a retirement account, that you should be taxed on the amount beginning on the 1 penny above that and up. That is allowing us, okay, if you're making exceptional, significant profits from investments, there should be some amount of taxation of that allows us to fund school construction and childcare for people. That's where the money's going right now. And it's been fantastic in helping us build a lot of more schools, helping us make sure that more childcare is more widely available. So that's something I very, very, very strongly support. I support in the legislature, and I still support it.
Okay. What about 2124, Drew, opt out of Washington Cares?
No, and it's a similar answer. I supported the Washington Cares Act when it went through the legislature and still support it.
Okay. Ace, your chance. What is your position on 2109, repeal the capital gains tax?
I mean, again, I'm not going to tell the public how to vote on public initiatives. They can make up their own mind. They can do their own research. As a legislator, future legislator, it would be my job to then look at what does pass and figure out what parts of it are going to work and which parts of it were maybe hastily thrown together into the bill or could be improved. Frankly, the initiative I'd like to talk about is actually one that involved property tax exemptions. It was a plan that I put together in 2020. I didn't think anyone was listening until the Republican Party put it together as an initiative for a $250,000 property tax exemption, which was way too high and had nothing to do with the graduated, focused, and intelligent proposal that I had laid out. But we really do need a small party property tax exemption that would decrease homelessness and encourage developers to make smaller properties available. And I'll
Okay.
talk about the next
I'm-
initiative as well.
I'm going to ask you, would your answer be the same on the opt out of Washington Cares, the Long-Term Care Act, the other initiative that's
Not exactly. Again, I mean, there are similarities to my answer, but I would address the specific nature of the bill and the things in it that we do need to look forward to becoming part of the law if it did pass, and find out why people are so concerned with the law as it is written, even if it doesn't pass. So I haven't even bothered to look at the polls to see whether these are popular bills or not. I simply would say that whether they pass or not, it's going to be pretty close to a 50-50. And if they don't pass, there's 45% of the population that needs their concerns still met. And if they do pass, there's 45% of the population that has got a new referendum passed that they didn't support. And we need to help make it palatable for everybody. That's been my goal, is to represent everybody, especially those that lose close 50-50 battles. Thank you.
okay. Thank you. This is kind of a long, detailed question, but should the legislature provide more funding to school districts when many are having financial problems? Or should the legislature concentrate on academic problems of our students? For instance, only 32% of Bremerton students met standards in English language arts, only 23.45% in math, and only 26.3% in science, and it's similar all over the state. Ace?
So the or in this question is interesting. Logically, we don't have to use or to mean one or the other, and we really should in this case think it to mean both. The legislature passed bills limiting the amount of local funding that can be raised for our schools, and then didn't give them enough state funding. What a catch-22 that was. And then as far as standards go, I've spoken with a wide range of people that have to deal with these school standards, all the way from dropouts to future Harvard students. And the people that care the most are the ones right in the middle. If you are this close to graduating high school, it might be easy to say you want those standards to be lower, but at the same time, what you really want is help to make it so you pass. And you want high standards. If a high school diploma is the only degree or certificate you're going to get, you want it to mean something. So too often we just lower the bar. And I really want us to raise the bar, even if it means we have low numbers. And I will stand there and let people say, hey, we have a low graduation rate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Drew?
So we've made some progress, most recently in the last legislative session, getting some more resources to the schools. We've been underfunding special education for years. That's been something I feel strongly about, and we made some progress on that. We made some progress to help schools deal with the inflationary adjustments that they're having in the so-called MSOC, material supplies and operating costs. Just to put that in normal person talk, like your car insurance has gone up, your house insurance has gone up. I mean, everything you pay for has gone up. Schools are having the same thing, but their funding doesn't automatically go up. And that's what I think we're going to have to continue to do to allow them to keep pace. The problem is, of course, like if you set up this tension, as the question did, between do you want to prioritize financial resources for schools or academic performance? What do you think gives the kids the chance to academically perform? It's if their schools have enough money to hire a reading specialist, okay? It's if their schools have enough money to make sure the buses run on a frequent schedule. It's if their schools have enough money to make sure they attract good teachers. So that is how we actually end up driving academic achievement, is making sure the schools are decently funded.
Okay, thank you. Okay, here's another education sort of related question. It has been demonstrated by numerous university studies that there is a short period of time from age 0 to 5 that a child's mind forms his or her initial neural pathways in the brain. These pathways can be robust or weak depending on parental reinforcement and can predetermine a child's success in school and indeed in life. What can be done to educate parents and or potential parents about this fact? And what can be done to educate the general public? Is there a legislative route? Okay, Drew.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty well known that you got to read to your kid, right? I think it's pretty well known you got to play with your kid. I think it's pretty well known you got to start, playing counting games with your kid. To the extent that people don't know that, that's the job of the other parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandfathers in the family to say, hey, you know what? It might be a good idea if you get out some board books and read to your kid. Now, at the state level, this is where we come in, and this is why the capital gains tax matters. Again, much of what the capital gains tax funds is childcare. And it's not childcare like we put kids in a room and turn on the TV and say goodbye. It's childcare staffed by early childhood educators who are trained to do this kind of thing in a much more systematic, enriching, fulfilling way. Like imagine the best kindergarten teacher you've ever seen in action, right? The best preschool teacher you've ever seen in action. That's where the state of Washington comes in, is providing this publicly funded childcare. So when a parent's got to go to work, all that reading, all those counting games, all that math doesn't just stop. It can keep going.
Okay, thank you. Ace?
Can I hear the question again?
Yeah,
It was very important.
it has been demonstrated by numerous university studies that there is a short period of time from the age 0 to 5 that a child's mind forms his or her initial neural pathways in the brain. These pathways can be robust or weak depending on parental reinforcement and can predetermine a child's success. What can be done to educate parents and or potential parents about this fact? And what can be done to educate the general public? Is there a legislative route? Long question.
Yeah, right. And I mean, the first part, the short part, I'd agree that we should provide optional services to help parents cope in the struggles of the 21st century. And I would definitely caution that it's just not the government's job to tell you how to raise your kids or try and indoctrinate them, particularly when we know this young and impressionable age. There was part of that question that just, we said it was a really short period there. And I think that the people that recognize it the most as being a short period is the parents of 16-year-olds. I think that's the time when it starts to hit you just how fast things went by. And that's the part that I think our new parents probably need to remember. Like, you might lose track of time, but for a small child, every minute counts. And when you get older, those minutes really do count, and you'll wish that you were there.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Ace, you get to go first. Since there continues to be food insecurity for many Washington state children, would you support the state providing free breakfast and lunch programs for all children? Why or why not?
Particularly breakfast and lunch programs at schools as part of generalized school funding. I know that's a big issue for a lot of students. Even that when the school program exists, it's not administered widely enough. We know we have to feed kids lunch, but how about breakfast? How about a snack to take home? And then our community around here has been doing a really great job with summertime snack programs. So I have a hard time being like, hey, the government should step in and take over what's already working. But I know a lot of communities don't have that. And it's a model that we could definitely expand. I know we were doing a really great job in Bremerton a couple years ago with a program that I believe had state funding, and then the state funding fell through and the program disappeared. And so that's another big issue I have, is when programs become dependent and then dry up.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if the public had unlimited money, I would of course support free school meals for everyone. The public does not have unlimited money, so the price tag of providing free breakfast and lunch to all school children, not just people who are lower income working class, is staggeringly large. And you could reasonably say, why exactly are we buying breakfast for the children of tech cajillionaires? That would be a reasonable question to ask. So, by the way, when you think of the other things that the schools desperately need, like, for example, more money for special education, more money to keep up with inflation, almost certainly some more targeted support for reading and math specialists, it's a reasonable question to ask if that is, in fact, the best use of money. So that's kind of why we've ended up the way we have in the legislature. It's just like anything else. Like, you do have to make prioritization questions. I think a better use of money is to deal more with special ed, more with inflation, more with targeted academic support.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Drew, you get to go first. Do you support the police reform legislation as passed, or do you think it should be changed some?
So I now think we're in a good place on this. We passed a dozen or so fairly wide-ranging police reform laws in the wake of the George Floyd murder. Almost all of those are in place and moving along without a lot of dissent. Nobody is saying, hey, let's bring back chokeholds. Chokeholds were great. Nobody is saying, hey, we should make it really hard to decertify police officers when they harm someone. Nobody's saying that. Nobody is saying, hey, we shouldn't have police officers de-escalate situations. Nobody's saying that. There's basically one exception, which is around police pursuits. And I said probably 2 years ago at this forum, I do not think we got the balance right when we passed the pursuit legislation the first time. I was under a different impression for what the existing jurisdiction policy was as it relates to what the initiative does. Now the legislation, now in the way that we've corrected it, I think we've backstruck an appropriate balance where there are safeguards to pursuits, but they are not illegal in all but the most narrow circumstances. And I think that's the right policy.
Okay, thank you. Ace?
May I hear the question again?
Yeah, do you support the police reform legislation as passed, or do you think it should be changed some?
So specifically, the rollback on the pursuit legislation, I believe that was a direct panic response to increased crime and a lack of enforcement, not even necessarily by our police officers, but by prosecutors. I know a lot of people were complaining that their cars were being stolen, and the police officers would show up and they would take a report, and it'd go to the prosecutor's office where they would get a letter back saying that, no matter how incontrovertible your evidence was, the barrier to prosecute was too high. And if you just happened to be the vice president of Liberty Bay Bank when your car was stolen, the results would be different. The police would immediately be like, yes, the prosecutor is going to prosecute. We can go arrest the guy. We know who he is. He's stolen many cars before. We just couldn't get him to steal a high profile enough car to get adequate response. So I think our legislature panicked instead of standing up to a wave of blue flu and bad prosecutors. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I think this is going to be our last question. We'll end a little bit before an hour. I'm sure you all don't mind, but Washington ranks very low out of all states on the number of psychiatric beds per population. What can be done to ensure access to mental health? Ace?
So I know our state ranks dead last, and there's probably good reasons for that. I mean, if you've been to Alaska, you would think they need lots of beds. And I've been to South Dakota, and I think they need lots of beds. Our area is beautiful. You can probably get a lot of good help just by going out to the beach. That being said, I know it's a huge issue. It's one that we've been trying to get fixed for years. Western State Hospital needs funding. Our current state legislature seems to run out of funding when it's time for things like mental health and feeding children. I don't know how that happens. They seem to have lots of funding for other things that don't seem anywhere near as important. So no, we have a massive shortfall. It's part of what's feeding our homelessness epidemic is people that really do need mental health help not having anywhere to go. It seems like it's a bipartisan issue. I can't figure out why it's not being addressed other than maybe it's not a swing district issue. So that's why we need to become a swing district and we can take the lead on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Drew?
So we are making progress on this one. We just closed on the purchase of a new behavioral health hospital. About 3 or 5 years ago, we started work to construct a new behavioral health teaching hospital at the University of Washington because, of course, part of the reason we don't have enough mental health services in the state is we don't have enough mental health practitioners in the state. And so creating residency slots for people to do that gets us a long way towards answering that problem. The other thing we do on that front, by the way, which we've expanded recently, is loan forgiveness for people who go into mental health professions in underserved areas. That's another way of going at the labor shortage. So, we are making progress on this one. We're definitely not there yet, I think, particularly as it relates to acute care and inpatient beds. But remember, mental health is another area where you need an all of the above approach. You need beds for people who need to be institutionalized. You also need services in the community so that people don't get to the point where they need to go inpatient somewhere. And that's the approach that we're trying to focus on.
Okay, thank you. And before the closing statements, I want to let you know that the video of this forum will be available in a couple of days at our website, which is lwv-kitsap.org. The recording of this event is owned by the League of Women Voters of Kitsap and may not be used for any purpose without the explicit written permission of the League of Women Voters of Kitsap. Ballots are coming out. I received mine today, I think, or maybe yesterday. Anyway, I just want to remind everybody that's tuned in to this that how important it is to vote. And that's why we do these forums, is to allow you to be educated voters and see the candidates and hear their answers to various questions. So I encourage everyone to take that easy step of voting. We get it at home. We can sit at our kitchen table and mark our ballot. So please, everyone, do that. And now for the closing statements. We will have Ace go first and then Drew.
Yes, I would like to thank League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. I'd also like to thank the NAACP for hosting the forum next week at the Marvin Williams Center. I'd like to thank Horizon House in Seattle for hosting a forum for our Secretary of State's office. That one's just been under the radar. And then I'd like to close with talking more about our kids. I heard Bryn Felix talk about how hard it's going to be for her having kids. And I've received kind of the opposite, where people wonder how I'm going to keep kids at the forefront despite not having any of my own. And I let them know, I might not be in the middle of the line watching the kids get picked up to get my own kids, but I'm on the hill seeing the line. As far as I'm concerned, I have a whole community of kids. I've been doing youth services, and we're kind of taught and trained that when those kids come in the door, those are your kids. You don't leave them out in the cold. You don't, close early because it's time for you to go home. You have kids until somebody else can take care of them. And I very much want to make sure that everyone knows that the kids come first. My platform is safety, schools, and service, but safety of children is a high priority there. Finally, I feel like we've been underserved in ways that there's only one way to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you. Drew?
Well, thank you again to the League for hosting this and all the many board members, other participants who put it on, and the participants for their great questions. And thank you to my colleague, Mr. Haynes, for coming tonight and sharing in this dialogue. Look, we're it's hard to keep your eyes off national news, right? This is a very volatile time in this country. And I think what we tried to do in Washington State does bear in that when we try to keep the temperature down, right? Like, I work very well with my Republican colleagues, and I like doing that. We passed a law authorizing full public broadband with bipartisan support. I work closely with Republicans on that. We passed my SHIELD law to protect abortion, reproductive rights providers in Washington State from getting harassed by anti-choice states elsewhere. We had bipartisan support for that. I worked very closely with a Republican House member who's a cop in normal life and others to create a strong universal firearms background check system in the state. That's the kind of collaborative across the aisle problem solving that I think really helps just keep the country on the right track. Not everything has to be us and them. Not everything has to be a big fight. Some things are, and that's fine. And I'm a Democrat, and you know what side I'm on for this. But when we can look for ways to work together, and we should do that as much as we can, that does help a lot. And that's what I've always done since I've been in office. And if you trust me with this office again, God willing, that's what I'll continue to do. Thanks for having me.
Okay, and thanks to both of you. I asked you to be respectful at the beginning, and I think you were. You have differences of opinions, but nobody pounded their fist on the table or yelled at the other candidate. So I thank you for that. I feel very privileged to live in the 23rd Legislative District and have good candidates come forward. So have a great evening. Good night.
Thank you much, Catherine.